I need to learn how to draw cats! And it's not just because cats are cute or that I want to draw my friends' pets. Although those are very valid reasons, there's actually a secret third reason I want to draw cats. Here's a hint. It has to do with character design and dragons. So let's get started. Obviously, before you can draw a cat, you have to know what a cat looks like. This means understanding what shape a cat is. We have to learn anatomy. Now, this can get complicated really fast, and I don't want to spend that long on it just yet. But I think it's important to at least understand the basic skeleton. It's particularly helpful if you studied a bit of human anatomy, so you can learn animal anatomy by paying attention to the differences. The biggest difference, of course, is that humans walk on 2 legs and cats walk on 4. But another thing worth paying special attention to is the shoulder blades. Our shoulder blades are located behind us, behind the rib cage. A cat's shoulder blades, however, are located on the side of its body to support its weight. And unlike us, cats and many other 4-legged animals don't have collarbones. So the shoulder blades are only held in place by muscles. Anyway, it's time to learn. I started by drawing the cat skeleton from a bunch of different angles to understand the shape of the skeleton. I did my best, but if you pay attention, you'll notice that there's something not quite right about my drawings. Can you see what it is? Let's take another look at the references. If you compare my drawings to a good reference, the ribcage is clearly way too stout, and the legs are too short. I kinda got distracted by how floofy cats are, especially the belly floof. Although it varies a bit, cats without their fur are actually quite lean. It's especially obvious if you look at hairless cat breeds like the Sphinx cats. But just learning the skeleton isn't enough if you want to draw cats, unless you want to draw anatomically incorrect Halloween skeletons. Like, no, seriously, why do they have ear bones? Anyway, I just said I didn't want to learn all of these complicated muscles, so isn't there something else we can do? So, to help me figure this out, I got this book, Force Animal Drawing by Michael D. Mattesi. And here's something interesting that he proposed. All animals, including cats, can be simplified into one basic shape. That seems hard to imagine because animals come in so many different shapes and sizes. So what is this shape? The shape is this. Huh? That looks kind of like a slug? Or a leech? No, I promise it actually makes sense. Mattesi says that this is the basic shape he uses to draw 4-legged animals, and they follow this shape for a specific reason. Let's take a look at this diagram. The force first starts at the area marked 1. It curves upwards because of the upwards force caused by the hips and legs supporting the body. At 2, there's a bit of downward force where the ribcage and internal organs are pulled down by gravity. And finally, at 3, the force and spine flow back upwards to the head. And even if it doesn't feel like it, you can see how a modified version of the shape can be applied in animals, like a giraffe and an anteater, 2 vastly different creatures. And keeping this simple shape can be even more useful when you think of it in 3D, because it's a useful starting point for drawing animals from different angles. Anyway, there's tons of great information in this book, and it shows how this shape can apply to specific animals. So if you want to check it out, I left a link in the description. At this point, I think I feel comfortable enough with drawing a cat's body. But how about the legs? Look at them. Look at those knees. Are they going backwards? How does this work? Actually, no, those aren't a cat's knees. One thing you should know about cats is that they're digitigrade. This means that they walk on the ball of their foot. Think of it as standing on tiptoes, as opposed to humans, which are plantigrade. We walk on our entire foot. In human terms, it would actually kind of look like this. So what looks like backwards knees are actually the ankles. The knees are all the way up here, hidden in the floof. By now, I think I have the information I need, so it's finally time to practice. Time to look at lots of cat pictures and start drawing from reference. I started with this simple pose first, trying to keep that forceful shape in mind. I was actually a little uncomfortable when I was doing this because I generally like to study the muscles in detail. That way I know exactly what shape everything is supposed to be. But since cats are so fluffy, I realized that I can probably get away with a few inaccuracies here and there. I just need to make sure that the overall body shape is correct. However, as I continued to practice, I noticed that there was something about my drawings that I really didn't like. It was the face. It just looked so flat. It looked like the facial features were painted onto a ball. In fact, I realized I didn't even know what shape a cat's head was in the first place. So it's time to learn. I started by getting some references of hairless Sphinx cats. That way, I can examine the shape of the head without having to worry about how the fur affects the shape. The first thing I noticed is that cats have very prominent cheekbones, probably because of their huge eye sockets. And here's a trick I like to use when trying to figure out what shape something is. Just draw it from a bunch of different angles. So I found a side view of a cat head and drew that as well. After practicing a bit more and thinking about the shape of a cat's skull, I figured out a good way of constructing a head would be starting with a stretched out sphere and attaching a blob for the muzzle in front. With this strategy in mind, I tried drawing the next cats, and I think it worked. By just making sure to keep the muzzle in mind, the cat's face looked a lot more dimensional. I was actually pretty happy with this drawing. So is that it? Am I done learning how to draw cats? Not quite yet. There's still something I haven't talked about at all, and that thing is fur. See, drawing and shading smooth things is pretty straightforward, but how would you handle something like this? I've covered it before in this video, but in case you missed it, I'll talk about it briefly here. Basically, what you don't want to do is add a whole bunch of lines everywhere, which doesn't look that good. What I like doing is defining the basic shapes first, as if it were smooth. Then I add a bunch of detail right here at the edge of the shadow. This already gives the impression of a furry texture, and you don't break up the shadow shapes that you work so hard to define. This is important for maintaining readability, so that's cool and all, but I still haven't mentioned one important thing. I said earlier that I need to draw cats, but actually I have a confession. I like cats, but I'm not actually very interested in drawing them. So why am I bothering with all this in the first place? This actually goes back to last year when I was taking a character design class. The teacher said overall I was doing okay, but there was one thing that I was obviously really bad at, and that was creature design. If you look at my attempts, I'm clearly having a hard time with anatomy and construction. Like, look, are the arms attached to the neck or something? I need to learn how to make them more believable, and how do I do that? By studying real animal anatomy, of course. Fantasy creatures like dragons should still follow the laws of physics to feel like they could exist. And it's best to start with a common animal where there's lots of references and resources to start with, so I chose cats. So it's time to see if I actually learned anything. It's time for salad. No, not that salad. This salad. The cat. He even has a Blue Sky account. Having a reference is really good, so let's find a good one. How about this one? Of wet salad. I started by doing a rough sketch of the whole body, using the things I learned from my practice. Then, using my sketch as a guideline, I filled in the rough silhouette and got some rough value blocks in. I'm still using flat colors here, which makes it easy to adjust the colors with the magic wand as I keep painting. Once I get the basic colors in, I focus on the edge of the shadows and start working in that wet fur texture. I'm still keeping the number of colors very limited at this point, but once I'm happy with the shape, now I can go back in and start painting in more detail if I want. But I have to be careful. I don't want to break up those value blocks I already laid out. So here you notice I'm painting in some fur, but I make sure it's very dark so that it doesn't look like it's in light. Once I clean it all up, here he is. Soggy salad. I think I did okay, but there's one more thing I want to try. This is Meatball. And he's very different to Salad in one specific way. His fur is lots of different colors. It's easy to separate the light and shadows on Salad because his fur is more or less the same color everywhere. But Meatball is a very colorful cat. It's a lot harder to tell the parts that are in shadow versus in light. I begin by sketching out the structure of the head, like I learned before. Then I start blocking out the basic colors. Instead of trying to focus on all the little colors right away, I simplify Meatball into just a few fur colors: white, light brown, and dark brown for the stripes. This way, it's easier to pick out which parts are in light and shadow. And let's also not forget about that gorgeous rim lighting, lighting him up from behind. I try to use big, simple geometric shapes for this initially, but while I'm doing this, I realize that these actually look kind of cool, so I try to keep these stylized shapes while I continue to clean it up. But when drawing this, I wanted to think about the most important thing I wanted to express with this illustration, which was this absolutely beautiful rim light shining on Meatball's fur and through his ears. I wanted to capture that subsurface scattering properly and really make it glow. And now when I'm done with all the basic shapes, like before, I go in and start adding detail, again focusing mostly on the edges of the shapes. Remember how I was talking about the beautiful rim lighting? I really like how on the edge here it looks blue, but I don't want to paint it in with a hard edge, so now I start using my magic wand tool to select the blocks of flat color I've placed down and airbrush in some of those blues. I add the whiskers, do some final touch-ups, and when I'm all done, this is the final results. How do you think I did? If you enjoyed this video, but you want to draw something besides cats, maybe check out this video. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll catch you next time. Bye-bye! So that's neat, but if you remember,